Folks, a lot of times we talk about self-defense and we talk about being in extremely tight quarters. Obviously, if a person is 20, 25 yards away, he doesn't pose near the threat that he does whenever they're, say, 3, 5 yards away or 5 feet away. And in many cases, that's where that threat is. Most people are not going to give themselves away as being a threat at very long distances away from you. Yeah, I know there's exceptions, of course, but typically that's not the case. So we have to condition ourselves knowing that in many instances we will be in very close quarters when we have to engage that threat. There's a pretty cool device out by a company called
DENauer.
Now these guys are a subsidiary of V7. If you're not sure or don't know who V7 is, the name is synonymous with quality. And I'll just leave it at that. Google them and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. But DarkHour has what they call a standoff device. It's a pretty cool device. What it's essentially designed to do is, and I'm going to make my gun safe here, just so you guys can see, I don't want the safety Nazis jumping all over me. By the way, we are on a closed and private range, so there's nobody else around out here, and I'm utilizing this to show you the safety aspect of it. Glocks are going to function in a pretty simplistic way. That's why they're so good at what they do, Glocks. However, if you get a Glock and this thing is ready to go and it's in battery, if you get them slightly out of battery, that trigger is not going to work. And you look how small out of battery that thing is. It's barely out of battery. Now it's back in battery, out of battery. It will not work, okay? And look at the front of it. That's the front. It's simply not going to work. What that does is, if you are dealing with a threat and you run this gun into their body because they are that close, whether they put their hand up against your muzzle or they're so close that you're fighting, rolling on the ground or whatever, and you push this gun towards them, if they're so close that you don't have any room to back off of them, that gun is going to be out of battery and you will not be able to pull that trigger. Now, this device is meant to make those close quarter combats a lot more effective and to get you out of that out of battery type situation. I'm going to push this thing on there, all right? Again, my hand's over the muzzle. We know the gun is clear. So you push this thing, and look, let me tell you something. This thing, when you push it on there, it comes with this piece that goes on the bottom that you run it through and it latches, it sends this base plate through into the rail of the actual Glock. Yeah, that's how you keep it on there permanently with the screws. But when you push this thing on there, it ain't coming off. I realize why they have the serrations on there. It's to pull this thing off, because you got to get a lot of grip to get this thing off of there. But essentially, the installation of it is very simple. You simply take the base plate out, the screws that hold it in place. You slide this device, the standoff device, onto your gun. Then you simply take that base plate, you run that base plate again, make sure that it is inserted into that rail on the bottom of the Glock. It's going to go through that hole on the device, and then you simply take your screws and your hex wrench and you mount that thing on there. Now, what this is going to allow this pistol to do at this point now is, it doesn't matter if it's running into the person or not, or into a hand or anything of that nature, it's going to fire, because nothing now can push this thing out of battery. The beauty of it is the fact that this little notch on the bottom is backed up against your trigger guard. So even if for some reason your base plate fell out of the bottom and this thing had some movement to it, it's still not going to allow this thing to go out of battery because of this piece right here that's pushing into your trigger guard. So no matter what now, and again, this is one of those things about pointing a gun at yourself. I do not recommend that. I'm just simply trying to show it to you guys. So now if you push your hand over the muzzle, I'm not even going to push it over the muzzle. If you push it over the bottom of the standoff device, you see the gun will now fire. The only way to put this thing out of battery would be now to hit these sights of some sort, or if somebody put their hand over and grabbed your gun like this and knocked it slightly out of battery like that. But it looks good. This particular device is one that has a compensator on it. It's going to drop that muzzle down a little bit more whenever you're firing it. The devices that are not made for having a compensator actually have just a rail that runs right straight across here, and it's simply a much shorter, flatter device that goes on the front of this. Does the same thing. I do like the fact that this piece protrudes out a little bit more. I like the fact that it's giving me a little bit more protection between me and that attacker. Now, I know what you may be thinking, that by putting this thing on there, you're taking away the rail. Well, again, these guys think of pretty much everything. You're actually replacing a rail on there, so you do have a new rail that you just put on there. You just lowered that rail a little bit is all. I know some of the lights that you may have for Glocks, they fit right in that contour of that trigger guard. I don't think you're gonna have much of an issue getting that back in there, utilizing this rail that drops it down about, I don't know, 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch. So anyway, it's just replacing your same Glock rail that you had before. So pretty cool device. Again, all devices have their places, right? You're gonna have to get used to the way this thing is going to go into a holster, for instance. If you're using a Kydex holster, most of these Kydex holsters close up, not completely, but very, very close at the end of the Kydex. So you're gonna have to make sure that you get either an open-ended holster. You could modify it. People, you're gonna cringe when I tell you this, but you could always get a Dremel set and open the end of that holster out. I know people are cringing right now because guns and Dremels, if you don't know how to use a Dremel, stay away from one. Don't use it on your gun. Don't dabble on it. I'm not encouraging you to do that. I'm telling you, if somebody is skilled and proficient with one, then try it. But yeah, that would be one way to open it up so that your pistol now could fit into your existing Kydex holster. Either way, try it. I may do one just to see. One thing I do want to point out is that the very popular Polymer 80 style guns, and we're going to be doing some Polymer 80 videos very, very soon. This is a Faxon pistol, which we will be doing a review on very, very soon. The Polymer 80, remember that your Polymer 80 lowers, even though they use a Glock upper in all Glock parts, the lower is definitely different. That includes the rail on these things. This Faxon Patriot does not have the same rail system as the Glock does. So if you try to put this standoff device that belongs on the Glock onto your Faxon or your Polymer 80 lower, it will not fit. You'll note that the little notch that the rails are needing to accept on the standoff device sit a little bit lower to accommodate the Glock rail system, whereas the Polymer 80 or the Faxon system sits a little bit higher. If you were to try to angle this thing or aim it to where the rail on the Faxon or the Polymer 80 lined up with the rail portion of the Dark Horse standoff device, you'll notice that it puts the floor of the standoff device much too high, so the bottom of the rail would actually bump into it, so it would not slide on. So these rails are not the same. They do not line up the same. Now, with that being said, if you take your device, and let me see if I can even get it off now. Maybe it'll work its way loose a little bit. There we go. If you take your Glock 17, these things are model specific. What I mean by that is the one I have is for a Glock 19. Now you may be thinking, okay, this thing goes on the 17, why not use it? One thing you'll notice is that the groove in the bottom of this thing is not in the same place. The groove on the 17 and the groove on the 19 are in two totally different places in regard to how they relate to the end of the muzzle. So that means that my groove is expecting, or my muzzle device is expecting the groove to be much further up front, and it's actually farther back here. So that plate has nowhere to go. So when I try to put that plate on, it can't bottom out and allow those screws to go in there to hold it in place, because the whole thing will still slide off. So make sure you get a specific one for the model that you have. You'll notice on this card right here that you can get all the models. Mine is specifically for the 19, the 23, and the 32. Again, that's the mid-size frame on the Glock. The calibers don't matter in those particular models because there's no different width or of course length on it. So you want to be, again, make sure you specify what model of Glock that you have. As you can see, I have one in there. This is a closed private range. The sound of gunfire you hear down there is on a separate range. It's not part of this. All right, if I'm engaging this threat up close like this, and he's bringing a knife at me, of course I want to get out of the way of that knife. If you'll notice, I learned something from you, Nick, on that. But let's say I'm holding his arm, or I'm fighting him off, and I put my gun into him. Again, remember, we're loaded here. I just pulled that trigger, nothing happened, because it sent my gun slightly, just like that, out of battery. Again, I'm fighting this guy, I'm trying to hold on to him, I'm wrestling with him, he's got a knife or something, I put my gun into him and nothing happens, because we're so close. I'm sitting here with no room to operate, and what that means is I can't back off the guy. I can't get far enough off of him to be able to get my gun back in the battery because I'm too tight on the guy and I can't do anything. So, and that goes for however I'm trying to fight the guy. I mean, if I have the gun up in his face or something like that, or anything, I'm not able to get around off. So whatever he's got in this hand or in that hand over there, he's doing his thing with. He's going to work on me. Now, let me show you the difference of that muzzle device. And look, let me say this, guys. There's a whole lot more videos that we're going to be going into that's going to address this close quarter stuff. Our friend at S2 Strategic, Nick, he came down and showed us a course or taught us a course we're going to be able to address a whole lot more of this. So I want you guys to know that this device that I'm about to show you is not the only option here, but it's one of the options. Now I have my muzzle device on here. I've got my standoff device. I'm unloaded now, but now I am officially loaded. Range is hot. Okay, remember, last time if I went at any kind of an angle like this, where this guy was engaging me and I was fighting him off, if you'll remember, if I put pressure, and it was just a matter of this much pressure with me pushing and pulling at the same time, pulling his arm, but pushing here. If you'll remember, I could not get a shot off. It immediately knocked my gun slightly, if ever so slightly, out of battery. Doesn't matter how hard I push. Let me just pull my gently pull here. Yes. Now, I'm gonna get over here, and again, my arm is a foot, my hand is a foot away. You're looking at perspective here, a foot away from the actual muzzle of the gun. I don't suggest you do this at home. I'm simply doing this for demonstration purposes. And if I'm pulling, if you notice, I'm torquing this thing pretty good. Doesn't matter what I do. This guy is going down because no matter what he's doing, even if our hands clash and he's somehow or another putting his hand against my muzzle, unless he puts it over the top, I'm still going to get my shot off. So that's the beauty of this whole thing. There's no way that this guy is going to be able to disarm me by putting my gun out of battery simply by me putting the muzzle up against his body. And guys, it's not just a matter of keeping your gun in battery. It's also a matter of the little bit of extra added weight along with the compensator. Remember, this thing is ported for compensation purposes on the front of it. It's going to make your follow-up shot, if you are shooting at any more of a distance other than these really extremely tight quarters, it's going to allow you to have a faster, more accurate follow-up shot. It's not going to have the amount of muzzle rise that you're used to. Again, these two things are working in conjunction with one another. The porting of the actual device and the little bit extra added weight. We're not talking about a heavy gun to begin with, so any additional weight added to the front makes a huge difference. I do like the multiple purposes of this standoff device. It seems that if you can incorporate it into your normal everyday routine of carrying, that it's a pretty effective piece for you. I gotta tell you, whenever I look at products like this, if I've never had one in my hand before, and I've never dealt with them, I won't say that I'm standoffish, but I gotta get to know these guys first. You know, there's a lot of knocks against the YouTube guys and a bunch of the gun guys out there that they either get paid to do reviews, or they have a vested interest in how some of these reviews go out. I got to tell you, I know a lot of the guys out there, and look, I don't fault anyone for getting paid for their reviews, all right? I wish I got paid for all of mine. But Dark Hour sent me this device. Now, I did ask for it. I asked them for this because I was like, look, I've got a lot of my viewers asking me about these things, and I'm curious about them. So they sent me one. I did not buy this one. However, they are not paying me for this review. I am genuinely pleased with this device because of the way it works and because of why it was designed. Okay, these things were designed for a specific reason, that very, very, very close, tight combat quarters that most of us probably will never be in, but if you're in it, you'll wish you had a device like this. Imagine putting your muzzle into the chest of somebody who's trying to do you, your family, your son, your daughter, somebody harm, and pulling that trigger and nothing happens. After hour after hour after hour of training, all that time, all that ammo, all that effort, all those expenses that you put into getting the proper training, and you pull the trigger and your pistol does not go bang the one time in your life when you needed it to. That's probably where this thing will come into. Now, I'm not going to fool you guys and tell you that I'll be carrying this thing. For one, as I stated earlier, I don't have a holster that will allow me to carry this right now. But I'm going to try to modify one of my holsters, one of my Kydex holsters, to see if I can carry this
Obviously, Kydex holsters is a matter of baking and melting plastic anyway, so anyone can make one that fits your Glock along with your standoff device. But I'm sure there's something aftermarket out there that's already being manufactured or produced. But yeah, I gotta tell you, I do like the fact this thing was a noticeable difference on keeping the muzzle down. I will be doing some future videos with this exact device. The reason why is because, as you guys might have seen on some of my other videos, the ransom rest that I have and the Mantis device that allow me to take the human being and the human element out of the whole firing process and really analyze the whole muzzle rise and recoil impulse. I'm going to do it with this because I want to see how much this compensator, but again, as I stated earlier, the compensator and the slight bit of weight on the front end of this device tends to keep that muzzle lower and allow you to get right back on target a little faster. Now, I can actually measure how quickly I can get back on target with the Mantis device, and I can show you how little or big of a difference that change might be in that muzzle flip using my ransom rest as well. So you will be seeing this whole setup right here in a future video. I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, be very telling, I think. But again, a cool device. The concept of it, this is not a hokey device. You know, no offense to some of the things where I've seen the little racker devices that allow you to charge your gun a little bit easier. Look, come on, guys. You know, if you're going to be man enough to shoot a gun, you got to be man enough to charge it. If you don't have the strength to charge a gun, you should not need some little fancy little tool to allow you to charge it, because then I'm not sure I trust you shooting the gun. This is not one of those devices. This is not some little trinket that's going to make your gun look cool for Instagram posts. I mean, maybe you find that it looks cool. I don't. I think it just looks normal. I think it just looks like an extension of the gun. But again, it's not a novelty item. I do think it's a functional piece that you can add to your gun. Again, the other devices that don't have the muzzle, the compensator on the end of it, are a whole lot flatter, take up a whole lot less real estate out in front of the muzzle. You might try that if you're carrying this thing. But again, guys, I got to tell you, it's a pretty cool device. Check them out. I appreciate those guys hooking me up and sending this one out to me. Just so you know, you're not getting it back, because I'm going to run some more videos of it. And if this thing proves to be promising for me, I'm one of those kind of guys that I like to cover all the bases, guys. If for some reason there's a slight little 0.5% of risk, or of my pistol, my firearm, or whatever I have, even if it's a knife, not functioning at that very slight, small moment in time whenever I need it to, let me tell you something. That tiny, minute space in time that you need your pistol or your knife or your weapon to work to defend yourself or your family is so small, but it is probably the biggest moment of your life whenever something, especially when something fails. And I want to be the guy that I cover all my bases. And I do feel like this Dark Hour standoff device is one of those things that allows me to do that.